I'm lucky enough to be sitting in the dressing room with Pauline Black, and Pauline was very heavily involved with the two-tone movement of the 1970s, early 80s, and produced such memorable hits as On My Radio. I personally love that one, Too Much Pressure, but my favourite, Missing Words, I have to say, my personal favourite. Pauline, welcome.
Hello there, Amanda. Hi.
Thank you very much for speaking to me today. How did you get to be involved with the Scarborough Festival?
Well, the Scarborough Festival has a whole lot of different people organising different events, but I suppose the selector's entry into this was because of John Sims, who's done a lot of the artwork and graphic design for the festival, and has also done all the graphic design work for the selector since 1979, really.
Yeah.
Our first two albums, Too Much Pressure in particular, is all his artwork, and he's just very kindly done the artwork for our album, which is coming out sort of in a few days' time, Made in Britain. So we've been talking to him all year. He's known what we're doing and what the plan was for this year, and when the album was coming out and things like that, and we thought that it would be a really, really nice thing to sort of showcase some of the new material at Scarborough Festival. This is the second year, and it's running, last year was great, and let's hope this year it grows even more. So that was our way in.
So is this your warm-up gig for the tour? Are we your first?
No, it's not really warm-up gig. We've been warming up really all over the summer festival sort of season. This is one of the last kind of festivals that we're doing this year. We've only got a couple more to do, but this one is by the sea, so that's absolutely beautiful and quite delightful for us.
Yeah, it is. It's delightful for all of us. So Pauline, and John lives locally, doesn't he? So he's very much a kind of he's very much a mascot for us now. He's part of our community. So you're part of our community now as well.
Well, we're all part of a community, aren't we? The world community, if we actually sort of get right down to it.
Yeah, we are. You're absolutely right. So can you describe, at the time in the late 70s and the early 80s, what it was like to be involved in that two-tone movement?
I think people these days, we live in a multicultural society now, so we're used to seeing, people from all kinds of ethnic backgrounds, and being involved in their cultural, things that go on throughout the year in different communities. Back in 1979, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
If you were, a young black person, you could be picked up on the street. They still had this very old-fashioned thing called the sus law, which means that they could pick you up on suspicion that you might have done something, and that impinged very much on the black communities.
Yeah.
And of course it caused a lot of ill feeling, and I think that at the same time the whole punk movement was going on, which was a lot of disaffected, if you like, white kids, and the music that they were into, and they were cottoning on to the fact that there was this other music in Jamaica called reggae. Bob Marley had come over, and I guess we kind of came through the Specials, through the Clash, through that whole association with a kind of a punky reggae kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then thought, well, okay, if you speed that up a bit, what do you get? You get ska.
Yeah.
And that was really the daddy of them all, kind of the precursor to all of that kind of music that was coming from Jamaica. And the way I look at it is we turn that into two-tone music. I consider it to be two-tone. Just the same as rock has a lot of different little subgenres in it. I think what people call ska music in this country also has a lot of subgenres in it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we are part of, if you like, the two-tone subgenre.
So actually really, really important in terms of what was going on socially and politically at the time. I mean, was that part of your standpoint, if you like, or was it really about the music?
No, as always. I mean, if you're going to write songs, if you're going to be into music, you might as well talk about something.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people who can do love songs and have done from the year dot.
Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't really, adding to that canon of work doesn't necessarily interest me very much. I always prefer the kind of work that, Bob Marley was coming over. He was talking about Trench Town. He was talking about people getting up and standing up for their rights and all those kind of things. And that's a decision that you make, I suppose, in terms of what you get into.
Yeah.
And if you're going to talk about things, then talk about the feelings and the problems or whatever of the people who feel themselves disenfranchised and marginalised in society. And I guess that's really what Two Tone did back then.
Yeah,
and that was, if you like, the unity thing between black people and white people, between black and white youth. It was to celebrate the things that unite us rather than the things that separate us. And that was done brilliantly through the iconography of black and white, and also, you know, you could take in the whole kind of sexist thing as well. There was myself kind of leading a band and in a very kind of androgynous image. There was also Rhoda Dakar, who there was an all-female band called the Body Snatchers, who was doing brilliant work and brilliant songs, you know, like The Boiler and stuff like that. So there was a whole, it was just a wonderful flowering in a way under the umbrella of Two Tone, of quite big bands, 7 people in each band, but all very different in their own ways, but all under that umbrella of Two Tone.
So how do you feel, for you personally, that influenced the way you, was it an antidote to the way you felt about political and social issues, or did you feel that actually it was a way for you to express yourself?
Music is always, being in a band is always a way to express yourself. And express your thoughts and feelings and hope that they chime with the audience that comes along to see you.
Yeah.
And I think Two Tone was absolutely spot on. We were spot on for that particular time period. What music you listened was really, really important. And it was all quite tribal as to, you know, what the lyrics said, what the music did, how you dressed, and, you know, what was the latest fashion, all those kind of things. I mean, Two Tone did all of that. It was a fashionable movement as well as having said something. I mean, for my money, it was the last time that there was a movement in this country that had a political edge to it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And coupled that with a fashion that went with it. You know, I mean, the Cool Britannia thing that went on, that really was more Cruel Britannia, I always used to think, rather than it was actually Cool Britannia. But it was something else. I mean, those kind of things get thrown up by the youth all the time. That's a cool way of being and stuff like that, and using whatever the latest technology is to make your music. But I think something that's actually embedded in thoughts and ideas, that's quite something else, and that doesn't come along that often.
Going back to what you were saying earlier on about there being all female groups as well, and being quite a lot of people within each sort of band, what was it like for you being a young black woman in what was then essentially still very much a male-dominated arena, music?
Well, I didn't know really that anything too much different, I guess. The punk movement, along had come some women like were in the Slits. I don't know whether you're familiar with the Slits, Ari Up and Viv Albertine and people like that, who are still around. Well, Ari Up unfortunately isn't around today, but Viv Albertine is still out there and still doing her thing, and still has that kind of anarchic way of approaching music. It was, so there were some women around who were doing that, but we didn't really know what we were doing. It was a little bit like making it up as we went along, because whatever the blueprint for women was before that was something completely different.
So it didn't matter.
You were a bit decorative before, you were expected to wear dresses and all these kind of things, you know what I mean? But we came along, kind of threw away the rule book, really. Some of us, you know, went for kind of an androgynous look. You know, Patti Smith was a precursor to us, but you know, I took something like that, and also polystyrene was around, and she was kind of mixing around all those kind of things. And then, of course, you had the, I suppose, the more tried and tested image, which would have been Debbie Harry in Blondie, but even she messed around with that and kind of, you know, made it a bit kind of grubby and a bit dirty and a bit punky and things. So it was a testing thing, I feel, for women, both in terms of picking up instruments, beginning to play, the way we looked. We were playing around with different ways that we could present ourselves, and with ideas as well. We were playing around with the ideas of how we could present ourselves. People like the Raincoats, you know, were very, I mean, influenced, you know, people as wide as Nirvana. I mean, Kurt Cobain used to listen to the Raincoats. Now, you wouldn't think that had happened. But in terms of ska music, it had been pretty, I wouldn't say male-dominated, but I don't feel that, you know, men sit there and think, well, this is a really male-dominated music. It just is. Yeah. It just is. It
just was what
it was. You know, that is what they do. Kind of, you know, they know all about these things. I don't think they're born with a gene for it, any more than I think the women are born with a gene not for it. But there was... it was a bit like we were allowed on board, and because it was two-tone, because it was opposites, because we were fighting for black, white or whatever, then you had to be fighting for male, female. There was an equality of that.
And I feel was about equality,
yeah,
as opposed
and I
to
feel
any...
that the Selector very much embodied that in its original kind of incarnation. You know, the kind of the male-female thing that we, Gaps Hendrickson and I, the other lead singer in the band, had going on was something quite rare, and you just don't see that.
And I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that, as you say, music's become quite isolated in as much as you can, I guess, make music in your own bedroom and be completely autonomous, and there's not that sense of a collective.
No,
so
not so
much
much
now.
Not so much. I mean, people backwards and forwards kind of, you know, MP3s and things, and mess around with it on their sort of Pro Tools and things. Well, it is real. It's a different realness. It's just phases that we go through.
Yeah.
You know, for us, it makes it an awful lot. If you live in different parts of the country, it makes it an awful lot easier.
Yeah.
If you can say, hey, can you put some bass on this? But you don't have to come all the way to London or Coventry or whatever. If you live in Nottingham, you just send it. And you couldn't do that before. So it's anything that moves technology on and makes it easier to do something, and also not only makes it easier but more accessible for everyone to get involved, has to be good.
And less elitist.
Yes, because elitism does absolutely nothing.
No.
Absolutely nothing. And I've always had a down on anything that I've felt was elitist.
Yeah.
You know, Coventry had its fair few stupid elitist people who I think that any youth kind of little movement, it always has those idiots, doesn't it, that has this record that nobody else has. And those things are important to us when we're young, but when you get older, those things are less important. You know, communication, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, and of course music is a way of being able to communicate so many things without there having to be any particular subtext. It's almost like, you know, you can talk about, if you want to sing a love song, then that's okay, but actually you can talk about things that, if you were to have a discussion about them, it might be difficult to broach subjects, but actually musically you can cover anything.
Yeah, musically, yeah. I mean, look at rap music.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something I necessarily sit down at home and listen to, but I mean, loads of people in my generation go, rap music, I hate that sort of thing. But no, I mean, that it's a form of self-expression.
It's about embracing.
Yeah, and I mean, if people read poetry properly, then they might be a little nearer to rap than what they think.
Yeah, because it's about the movement.
It's about the rhythm and the use of words and stuff like that, you know.
Finally, Pauline, do you have any words of wisdom to share with our young listeners when it comes to following your dreams and aspirations?
In terms of dreams and aspirations, I'm certainly not one that I would turn around to any child and say, right, start dreaming. Dreams get you nowhere. Work gets you somewhere. And the thing that gets you most is education, whether it's self-education or, you know, sort of listening, I guess, to every now and again you get some good teachers. I do not necessarily think that all teachers are good. All my teachers weren't sometimes, but there's always one teacher who'll tell you something that's useful to you. And it's to run with that and to have some self-belief in yourself that what you think is, you know, worth telling to someone else. And you never know, someone might line up behind you and think, yes, I think that too. And then 3 people might decide that that's a good way of going. And I think always to be sharing and to think that, you know, it's communication is the main thing. Because all we are our own stories, and that's all you can do is kind of bring that to each other and listen to each other's stories and go forward from there. But education, I think, is definitely the way forward.
And I mean, really, that sort of says a lot for the collaborative approach of learning. It's this idea of collaborating and sharing ideas, which is, you know, the way to move forward. And I think that's really important for kids to know, isn't it?
And also looking at ideas from a lot of different standpoints, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. You know, I mean, history is all about...